Hey Norm, how are you?
Okay, Yaakov, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, fine.
Good.
Baruch Hashem. Hey,
Hello, Yaakov. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, very well. How are you?
Good. How was your trip to Toronto?
Haven't done it yet.
Oh,
I'm in New York.
oh, you're
Um,
in New York. Yeah.
Toronto
I
is
thought-
Thursday. Thursday we're going to Toronto. Yeah,
Good, good.
yeah.
I'm leaving.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Also, you see the number, there's only one number that was shown in the helicopter, 1136, which is the number of confirmed dead in the attack on October 7th.
Oh, really?
Really? These spooky things.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty obvious. It's, well,
Yeah.
Now let's get down.
No, we're in volume, we're still in volume 15.
Page 273.
That's where we are.
273, I'm sorry. I think I wrote 274, but I,
And today, follow the ruling of the Ramon the Mishnah Berurah, as the Isha Yisrael writes, thus, one should not conduct oneself with Tarta de Satra on the same day, unless one is davening with a minion that will otherwise be canceled entirely. Remember, we talked about the machlokas between Rav Yehuda, who said that you may not daven mincha after plaga mincha. Plaga mincha is that period of time, 9.5 hours until shkia, that halfway. And therefore you have to daven mincha before then, and therefore you can daven marav after. So, but you can't use the leniencies of both. So you can't, we chachamim allow to daven mancha up until shkia, but then you have to daven marav after shkia. You can't daven marav before mincha before shkia, and then daven marav also before shkia like Rav Yehuda. That's the tarta de satri that you're trying to avoid. Right? So you have to wait until shkia. That's what they're saying on the same day, unless the minyan will be canceled. So let's say you're at a shul where the people have to leave before shkia. So you're saying b'shas chag you can use the leniencies of both. You can daven mincha after plag like the chachamim, and daven ma'ariv prior to shkia according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's what he's going to say. Naklekwa tanoim, he means Rabbi Yehuda and the chachamim. Mimosai efshal lispal tfilas ma'ariv. When can you daven tfilas ma'ariv? Rabbi Yehuda says after plag. The chachamim say after shkia. Kivan shlo nifzak halacha b'zeh. Right? Remember the Shulchan Aruch said you can do like him and you can do like him.
Yeah, begin.
Well, that's what the Shulchan Aruch didn't say. You can do like both. He said you can do like him, like them. The Chronim are wrestling with this issue. You can do like either one. Right? Like I just said, you can't daven mincha after plag according to Yehuda, but daven ma'ariv before shkia according to Chachamim. That you're not allowed to do. However, you're about to lose the minyan if you wait until shkia. The kodim shkia sachama. I couldn't say it more clearly, right? You can daven mincha after plag, like Rav Yehuda, and daven Ma'ariv prior to Shkia. Excuse me, you can daven Mincha after Plag according to the Chachamim, because Rabbi Yehuda says you can't daven Plag after, you can't have Mincha after Plag. But you can daven like Rabbi Yehuda that Ma'ariv prior to Shkia. According to the Chachamim, Yad Lachar Meken Yispal Tfilas Ma'ariv. That's an important halacha. The question of whether one may begin Ma'ariv after Shkia or only after nightfall, if one is following the opinion of the Chachamim, we're talking about Tzeis, will be discussed further next year. Now, we don't know, we follow the leniency that you can daven Ma'ariv after Shkia. We're going to see that's not so pashut. Some want you to wait until Tzeis HaKachavim, 20 minutes later. Now, you remember Rabbi Krauss at Young Israel of Hancock Park during Sfira time, where he was makpid that we should say Sfira after Tzeis HaKachavim. We said Sfira tonight after Shkia, but before Tzeis. So the Mishnah Berurah says that there's one opinion that says you're Yotzei, but there's one opinion that says you're better to do Sfira after Tzeis. So he says if you said Sfira with a bracha, like we did tonight after Shkia, but before it says, you should repeat the count after it says. Say tonight was, whatever the tonight was.
Yeah.
Did everybody count already? No.
Um,
Okay, so that's why I didn't say the number. Many Sephardim are more lenient and recite both Mincha Marv with the Manyan after Plaga Mincha before Shkia, even when the minyan would not be canceled otherwise. Meaning, they're much more lenient. They don't have a problem with this Tarta de Satri, this following both opinions. The Yakut Yosef, who's the son of Ovadia, notes this custom, writes that there's sufficient basis to justify it, i.e. the statement of Beis Yosef, that many are accustomed to being lenient in both directions, since tefillah is a rabbinic obligation. Says the footnote, interestingly, it seems from the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah, quoted above, that the Ashkenazim originally were more lenient to recite Ma'ariv earlier than sunset, and Sephardim were more particular to wait until after nightfall. It seems that on this issue, the custom of the two groups has been somewhat reversed from once it was. Okay. Says the Yakut Yosef, Mitzvah and Amuchad Ispal Arvis V'likro Kriya Shema Achar Tzeis HaKavod. So he gives you a hierarchy. If you could, it's best to daven Ma'ariv and Kriya Shema after Tzeis HaKavod. Mikol Mokom Kvar Nagu Etzin Lakel Ispal Arvis Kodem Hashkia. He says by the Sephardim, they daven Ma'ariv before Shkia. Vas Mispal Mincha Samach L'Shkia. They daven Mincha right then. The Somchin Tfilas Mincha Larvis, and they go right into Ma'ariv for Mincha.
At the Pesach program, they would finish before we would start sometimes. Marav. They daven Marav very early. This one.
Were you
The Pesach
Sephardim?
program.
Was it Sephardi?
No, there was one small group. They had a Sephardi minyan.
And you see they daven Ma'ariv early.
You know, I remember the same thing when we were in
Yeah.
Mexico also.
Yeah.
When we were starting, they were davening, finishing early.
Yeah.
That you see based on this Yakut Yosef. Umiu nachon mod l'kaim shirei Torah ben mincha la'arvis. Ulospala arvis achar tzeis HaKavod. He says it's better to daven Ma'ariv after Tzeis HaKachavim for mitzvah goreres mitzvah. V'yesh noagim shelo yispal arvis mibod yom. Some do not daven Ma'ariv while it's still day. B'yom shespalu mincha achar plaga mincha. Like this issue we mentioned, because you're involving pasking like Rav Yehuda and like the Chachamim, meaning davening mincha after plag and davening Ma'ariv while it's still day. Shelo lasos tarti disaster b'yom echad. Gam b'zek for nagulakel. He said they're minhagim to be lenient. Yeshlo mashay smachu, and they're people to rely on. Okay. Sai, we're on 274.
Thank you.
Okay. So up until now, we've been learning that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you should daven mincha before plag. Plag is 10 hours and 45 minutes, right? It's halfway between nine and a half hours and Shkia. 10:45. And you have to daven mincha before then. And then you can daven Ma'ariv prior to Shkia. According to Chachamim, you can daven Mincha all the way to Shkia, and you have to daven Ma'ariv after Shkia, because they held that's when you daven Ma'ariv. As we have seen, one is permitted to choose whether to consistently follow the opinion of Rav Yehuda or the Chachamim with regard to the time for Mincha and Ma'ariv. Today, it is customary in most places to follow the opinion of the Chachamim and recite Mincha until Erev, or evening. However, it is not entirely clear how to define this term. And the Rishonim, in fact, dispute the matter. Let's see this footnote. See volume 10, Shiur 7, which we learned, where we learn that the poskim disagree as to whether halachic hours of the day are calculated from Alos HaShachar, dawn, to Tzesa Kochavim, nightfall, or from Netzach Hama to Shkia. It is explicit in the Gemara Masechta Brachos that the latest time for Mincha, according to Chachamim, is identical to the end of the Plaga Mincha period, meaning to the end of the hours of the day. Thus, the dispute between Rishonim, quoted above, regarding the latest time for Mincha, is equivalent to the dispute between the Achronim regarding calculation of the halachic hours of the day. As there is substantial evidence to support the position of the Gra that hours of the day should be calculated from sunrise to sunset, which means 12 hours only when it's March 21 or September 21, when the days are equal, right? It follows that one should also not daven mincha after sunset. This point is confirmed by the Gra himself in Bir Gra and supported by the Mishnah Berurah in Sharat Zion. So, according to Rambam and Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, one may recite mincha until sunset, meaning not like Rav Yehuda, who said you have to stop mincha by plag, right? Zman mincha k'tana mitesho mechzad shishar min hayom shav revia. Mincha k'tana, it's from 9.5 hours until an hour and a quarter is left in the day. That's the plag. And then yesh lo yispal also ad shetishkar chama. But you can daven mincha until Shkia. According to the Kesef Mishnah, who is the Beis Yosef, the Rambam in this source alludes to the Gemara's conclusion that one may choose to follow either Rav Yehuda or the Chachamim. Thus, if one follows Rav Yehuda, one must recite mincha until plag, until 1.25 hours before the end of the day. And if one follows the Chachamim, one may recite mincha until sunset. Others interpret the Rambam to mean that one may only recite mincha till sunset as a b'diavad, but really you should do plag. What does the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah say? Tfilas mincha ha'erev, ein lefarish adi tzizuk kochavim shulai l'mamish. Don't translate that to mean tzeis, which is mamish night. Here, when the Gemara says you should daven mincha only until erev, Rabbeinu Yonah also is holding that the terminology erev refers to shkias hachama. By contrast, Rashi and other Rishonim write that one can recite mincha all the way up to tzesa kochavim. Rashi says, "Ad erev ad chashecha." See Shagasarye, who cites many proofs for this approach. He also argues that the zrika may have been permitted to be performed in principle until nightfall, meaning zrika sadam in korbanos also ends at this time. So, according to Shagasarye, it might have been able to be done until tzeis. The Shulchan Aruch quoted above refers to night, Lila, that's source 15. When it talked about that you say mincha erev, the Shulchan Aruch, of course, refers to night in discussing the latest time for mincha, which appears to refer to nightfall rather than sunset. Nightfall here is being used for tzeis. The Ramah there as well explicitly states that one may recite mincha till tzesa kochavim when the stars emerge, if one follows the opinion of the Chacham. However, the Mishnah Berurah rules that the halacha follows the opinions that one must recite mincha before sunset. That's why we are pretty makpid, because we use the Ashkenazi community of the world today pretty much follows the Mishnah Berurah on most things, and we therefore always make a point to daven mincha before Shkia. Even though he sees there's opinions that say mincha can be davened all the way until tzesa kochavim. The das is the Mishnah Berurah. The after mechaber v'ram mashma yesh poskim rabim shecholkim b'zeh. the Mechaber and the Ramah brought halachic decisors that argue that the time should feel mincha rak kodem shkia sachama, and that mincha is only until shkia. A person should be careful to daven mincha prior to shkia. Dahainu shigmor tefillah so ba'od shlo niskasa hashemesh me'inenu. Shmona Esrei should have been completed prior to shkia sachama. Mutav lispal bismana bichidus milispal achar kach b'tzibur. You should better daven mincha in the zman rather than with the tzibur after the zman. The eved yuchal lismach chadas makilim lispal achar shkia. You can rely on these opinions to daven mincha after shkia. Ad Rav Shakonim says go until 15 minutes before it says. He explains further that the time referred to is 3/4 of a mil after sunset, the length of Bein HaShmashos. The basis for this leniency is the view of Rabbeinu Tam, that in many instances halachic sunset is 58.5 minutes after our perceived sunset, and 13.5 minutes before Tzeis HaKochavim. See below that this, since common practice is not in accordance with Rabbeinu Tam, it's questionable whether one should rely on this leniency.
Of course, this depends on where you are, as we talked about.
Yes.
before.
How many minutes? Yes.
Yeah.
But he says that it's better to daven alone in a proper zman than daven with a minion after the time. According to the Mishnah Berurah, the opinion of the Gra and other Achronim is accepted that mincha may only be recited until sunset, even if one must forgo tefillah b'tzibur. One may only be lenient to daven mincha for approximately 15 minutes after sunset in a b'diavad case where one had not yet done so prior to sunset. According to Barei Bazak, that's the Shalas and Shuvas that comes out of Eretz Chemda, the opinion of the Gra has been entirely accepted today, and even the leniency of the Mishnah Berurah in b'diavad situation should not be followed. It means we should always daven mincha prior to shkia. Of course, Rav Ovadia disagrees and maintains that one may recite mincha even after sunset. Ulam l'fianis daiti nira shahoil v'rabo apuskim asovrim shemutu l'chadchilas pa mincha tzezegov. He says there are many poskim that say it's permitted to daven mincha all the way until tzeis. V'chein das Maran shekibano, and certainly the Shulchan Aruch, who we've accepted his opinions. Akol panim the bein hashmashos shalanu shehu la'achar shenichses hashemesh be'enov are bein hashmashos, which is after the shkia. Yesh la'akel mishum sveik sveika. We can be lenient. Sham halacha Rabbeinu Tam v'siyata, which means the bein hashmashos is much later, ends much later. So the period of tzeis is really till 13 minutes. The period of shkia is really considered 30 minutes prior to tzeis. Shebemeshech shir shlosha mil, the reva 3.5 mil, 58 minutes and a half. Achash shenichses hashemesh after shkia meinenu nechshav liyom gomer. You can still consider a day. The imtim salomer shalacha kachokim, that the loch is like the people who argue with Rabbeinu Tam. The sovrim shemiyad achar shkia hashemesh nechshav ben hashmashos, who all that is considered ben hashmashos immediately. Maybe it's day. If the minion has come late, so he disagrees, but Ferush with the Mishnah Berurah. One may recite mincha till nightfall, which means tzeis. Dudo sfeik sfeika. What's the sfeik sfeika? 2 doubts. Maybe the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, who calculates sunset differently than our standard practice. He calculates it, we said it's 58 minutes after Ashkia. Look at the footnote. Rabbeinu Tam and many other Rishonim hold that sunset is defined as approximately an hour after the sun actually dips below the horizon. And nightfall is defined as 72 minutes following the standard time for sunset. You understand? That's the people who after Shabbos wait Rabbeinu Tam. They're waiting 72 minutes after our Shkia. As mentioned previously, that the widely accepted halacha today follows the opinion of the Gra that sunset is defined as the actual setting of the sun. The opinion of Rabbeinu Tam and the Gra and the calculations of sunset and nightfall we discussed later on in volume 17 when we talk about when does Shabbos start, when does Shabbos end. That's coming soon. And what's the fake seika? The halacha is like Rabbeinu Tam, and even if the halacha is not like Rabbeinu Tam, perhaps the period of Ben Hashmoshes. What's Ben Hashmoshes? It's the period between sunset and seis. Maybe it's treated as daytime, and one may still recite mincha. Because what do we say Ben Hashmoshes is? Safek yom, safek laila. That's why you can't do mila during that time. It might be day, might be night.
According to Tzvi, that's.
It's safek yom.
And yo.
Right. We learned last week in a shir with Tzvika Reisman that Rav Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi brought a proof that normally we don't do Mila Ben Hashmoshes, right? If a child was born on a certain day Ben Hashmoshes, we don't allow the Mila on Shabbos, we push it off to the next day. Because we don't do Mila at night, we only do in the day. Says the Gemara over there, what if we know exactly the child was born Ben Hashmoshes and it's exactly into the bait? Why can't we do it? So the Gemara says there, because Ein Litzamtsein, we cannot calculate time perfectly. So asked Rav Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi, why did the Gemara have to give that answer? It could have said easily, Ben Hashmoshes is Safek Yom, Safek Laila, and you can't do Milat Laila. And for Rav Mordechai Ezrachi, Ben Hashmoshes is Safek Yom, Safek Yom. It's either today or it's tomorrow, but it's considered Yom. That's why the Gemara had to come up with another reason why you couldn't do the Mila. So it's not really Safek Yom, Safek Laila, it's Safek today, Safek tomorrow, but tomorrow Yom. Okay. Thank you. The Piskei Teshuvos notes that the practice in many places in Europe was to be lenient. He suggests that this practice stems from the parallel of Mincha to the afternoon Korban Tamid, portions of which were also fit to be offered until nightfall. Also, Rabbeinu Tam was once accepted much more in Europe. That means some parts of the Korban Tamid could be put on the Mizbech even at night. Given this, the Piskei Teshuvos writes that even some Ashkenazi poskim, such as Rav Shlomo Yosef Braun, we don't know who that is, and Rav Shmuel Vosner, who we do know, the Shevet HaLevi, agree. Rav Shlomo Braun is the Shiurim Etziyonim Ba'aloch. I think he's in New York. He's a New York posek. Agree that if one must choose between joining a minyan for mincha that begins shortly after sunset or reciting mincha long before sunset, you should daven with the minyan. Says the Piskei Teshuvos, Omnam, Ein Li'is Alem, you can't hide from the fact that Bashar Mechozot in other areas, Are Europa, in Europe, Shadaru Sham Gonevet Tzadike Olam, great tzaddikim lived there, Shayu Medaktim Makol Tag V'Tag Da Shulchan Aruch U'Nosei Kalav, who were careful for every point of the Shulchan Aruch. Lo Noto Medivreim Af Lo Kakutzu Shul Yud, not even the little thing of the Yud. Hayu Mispal Mincha Af Lachar Shkia Mizman Seis HaKachovim. They would daven mincha after Shkia until it says the Af Shebekala Yicholim L'Sada Yoimim Mispal Mincha L'Fnei. Even though they could have organized their day to daven mincha before Shkia, the Zos Mishum Shegam Ba'Krovas Atomid Hayu Nesacheu K'tor Shel Ben Arbaim Kshem LaKrov Ad Alayla. The wine libations and the incense of the Minchas Ben Arbaim, the Korban Atomid that was offered in the afternoon, aspects of the Korban could be offered even until it says Akoponim, Af L'Minig Rabim, Uv'Frat B'Eretz Yisrael B'Plim L'Spal Mincha L'Fnei Shkia. The general custom is to daven mincha before Shkia. Hiskimu Gdolei Adorashim B'Efshuruso L'Spal B'Minin L'Achar Shkia. If you can daven mincha after Shkia up until 13 and a half minutes, and you have a choice of davening alone before Shkia, Yadif L'Amti L'Spal B'Minin V'Lo L'Spal B'Echid L'Fnei Shkia. So here is a strong opinion that you should daven with a minyan. Practically, yes?
This really varies tremendously depending on where you are. I davened at Chabad of Midtown tonight, Mincha and Ma'ariv, and Mincha was at 6:45, which was before Plag, and Ma'ariv was at 7 o'clock. So which was after Plag. Excuse me, Plag was 6:40. We davened Mincha 6:45, and Ma'ariv at 7. And if you travel around Europe and others, there's really no consistency to this. Everyone follows different minhagim, and that's just the way it is.
Right? Practically, the most widely accepted custom today is in accordance with the Gra and the Mishnah Berurah to recite mincha before sunset, at least lechatchila. Nevertheless, a sizable number of communities, especially in the Hasidic world, follow the approach of the poskim who permit reciting mincha after sunset during Bein HaShemashos. Even according to those who do not recommend reciting mincha after sunset, in a case where one can choose between praying with the minyan after sunset or alone before sunset, many Sephardim and some Ashkenazim prefer waiting for the minyan, following Rav Ovadia, Rav Braun, and Rav Vosner, while other Ashkenazim pray alone before sunset, following the Gra, Mishnah Berurah, and the M'Rabanan. So let us apply what we have learned to the following times given on myzmanim.com for New York on May 1. So here's Zmanim website. Midday is 12:53. Earliest mincha, which is mincha gedola, is 1:28, right? Because it's 6.5 hours. Mincha ketana is 9.5 hours, 4:57. Plag is going to be halfway between 4:57 and 7:51, which is 6:24. And Shkia 7:51. The times used here of mincha ketana, plag, and mincha according to the opinion of the Gra, who calculates the halachic hours of the day from sunrise to sunset. According to Magen Avraham, who calculates them from dawn to nightfall, these times will be later. Based upon these times, let us summarize the different guidelines that we have learned. Well, you couldn't daven mincha prior to 1:28, which is mincha gedola. So you could daven at that time. If you're following mincha gedola. If the earliest time for mincha ketana is 4:57 p.m. Means if you want to follow mincha ketana, you have to wait until 4:57 to daven. Latest time for mincha, following Rabbi Yehuda, we said was plag, which according to this was 6:24. Latest time for mincha for chachamim, according to the Gra, was 7:51. Latest time for mincha following chachamim, according to, we said, Shulchan Aruch, Ramah, Rav Ovadia, is 13 minutes after sunset.
Now, we also learned that there's one opinion that you can daven b'shas chak, you can daven mincha between midday and mincha gedola. We did learn that.
According to, if you were really in an emergency situation, you could. Okay. Now we're gonna throw the daily ringer in here. The latest time for tachanun, meaning mincha has tachanun. So many times, if you're davening, if you started your mincha before shkia, like we've been taught to do, it might drag until the end of your tefillah is after shkia. Can you say tachanun after shkia, right? In addition to the question, latest time to recite the Amida at mincha, which is what we've been dealing with, commentators also discuss the latest time for tachanun, which is said most days immediately after Chazoras HaShatz. According to most poskim, Chazoras HaShatz must also be completed by the latest time for the relevant tefillah, although some disagree. This holds true for mincha as well as shachris. If there's not sufficient time to complete Chazoras HaShatz before sunset, one potential solution is to shorten Chazoras HaShatz, which was discussed in volume 11, the Heiche Kedusha. In addition, according to some opinions, one need only begin the tefillah before the end of the time and not conclude it by that time. According to that opinion, one may begin Chazoras HaShatz of mincha before the latest time, even if one concludes it later than that time. And finally, some poskim hold that one should recite the full Chazar Shots even after sunset. So Tachanun is said after the Chazar Shots. Although the Rishonim do not address this issue directly, Rav Amram Gaon reports that the practice was to say Tachanun even at Ma'ariv. Hachi Yomer Rav Tsar Shalom, Rosh Yeshiva Gaon Yaakov, Shalir Machsei, Shemutzer Lipol Upon Avakir Racham, Akad Filis Arz, Afilu B'tzibur. They would say Tachanun even after Ma'ariv. Kach Minag B'Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel Shnatim Al-Pleim Arvis Chutz Me'er Shabbos. They would do Tachanun even after Ma'ariv. This practice is not obligatory, says Rav Sadia, but it's not problematic. The Siddur Rav Sadia Gaon, we must not do Tachanun after Ma'ariv. They do it like as an additional prayer. However, at some point in time, that practice died out. The Rambam and others write that the clear practice in all Jewish communities is not to say Tachanun at Ma'ariv. The Eshkol explains that this is because Ma'ariv itself is essentially a voluntary prayer. It's Rishus. Here he says one who wants to do Tachanun after Ma'ariv can do it. The reason why the minig is not to do it, mishum tahat fil sarvis gufei rishusi. The whole davening Ma'ariv, remember, there were 2 korbanos a day: the Tamid Shel Boiker, the Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim. Shachris and Mincha were established for that. So what's Ma'ariv? So Ma'ariv is the burning of the Evorim Upedorim. When you did the korban, the limbs were allowed to be burnt throughout the night. So that sort of takes the place of Ma'ariv. Because it was not a chova, it was only a rishus, Chachamim didn't make a takana to do tachanun. All of these sources indicate that there's nothing problematic about reciting tachanun or falling on your face at night. Today, Ashkenazim rest their head upon their hand, while Sephardim simply sit down due to Kabbalistic reasons. We learned this before. When we went through this, the Sephardim don't put their head down on their arm. Only there's no obligation to do so at Ma'ariv. The Beis Yosef quotes some who offer mystical reasons for not performing the Tilas Apayim at night. Kosuv Rabbeinu Agadol Mari Abu Bob, B'Shem Sefer Tzroiros, B'Layla Ein Bo Nefilas Apayim. We don't put our head down at night. Va'inin shekem mekubal chachamim ki niflat apayim remez lemidas halayla. That putting your head down is like a hint tonight. Ve'ein noifel mal pneim. V'korvadov lakatzitz benetios. This is a Kabbalistic term invoking destruction. V'leilei hashmoris norgim lipol afneim shu korv liyom. When they did slichas, they did do nefilas apayim because it's similar today. Because slichas was done at dawn, before dawn, while it was still night. Based on the above, the Shulchan Aruch writes simply that there's no nefilas apayim at night. The language used in the Shulchan Aruch and most of the sources refer specifically to nefilas apayim, following on one's face. However, it would seem that you could recite the chapter in Tehillim associated with Tachanun, in any case, without falling on your face. This is indeed the ruling of the Eliyah Rabbah, cited by the Mishnah Berurah. On the other hand, the Kaf HaChaim writes that the Arizal would not agree with this ruling, since he writes reciting verses at night still causes the Midas Hadin to be aroused, should not be practiced. Indeed, as noted at the end of this section, the communities that do not recite Tachanun after sunset do not recite the chapter of Tefillin either. The Yalkut Yosef, who appears to group together the recitation of the Psukim and the Nefilas Apayim, notes that Sephardim today, in any case, do not actually fall on their face. The Beis Yosef quotes some we learned that. Nevertheless, the Taz writes that the mystical concern only applies after complete nightfall, meaning tzeis, and not during Ben Hashmoshes, which is similar to the Tachanun recited during Slichas, close to the morning. So the Taz is trying to be malamet schust of people who say Tachanun after Shkia. Nira shein lochush lezeh, kozman shein vadei laila. you don't have to worry about this tachnun business when you know for sure it's night, which is safe. Elebein hashmashos, that twilight zone, as Harold likes to call it, the period between ben hashmashos and seis, the lo gara milel hashmosh, it's not any different than dawn when the Svardim say slichas. According to the Taz, it would seem that even if mincha is delayed and chazor shatz is completed after sunset but before night fell, the fields of pine should be permitted. The Taz is also quoted by the Mishnah Berurah and many other poskim. This is the practice in many places today, but the Ben Ish Chai disagrees. So I don't know why our practice is always to be careful not to say tachlin after shkia. The Mishnah Berurah says you can do it. Ein lasos bilapam balayla. Hoshesh safek dainu ben hashmashol yasun the fields of pine. The sheval tasif adif. He says the Ben Ish Chai says not to do it. Based upon the Ben Ish Chai and others, some Sephardic and Hasidic communities do not perform fields of pine or recite tachlin when mincha ends after sunset. What activities are prohibited before tefillas mincha? We learn in volume 11, Shir 1, that Chazal prohibited many activities prior to reciting chakras in the morning because one may not prioritize one's personal matters over communicating with Hashem. In this section, we will learn the parameters of which activities are forbidden prior to mincha and from what time of day the prohibition takes effect. As we will see, the reasoning employed differs from that relevant to chakras. With regard to mincha, one has already been engaged in his worldly pursuits all day. But a different concern exists, that one may miss reciting mincha if one becomes too preoccupied with those activities. Thus, the rule concerning which activities may not be performed prior to mincha reflect that concern. The Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos explains that Chazal forbade certain activities close to the time for mincha. Lo yeshev adam lefnei hasefer samach lemincha chisma. A person should not sit with a sefer right before.
No, hasaper, the barber.
I'm sorry, saper. He shouldn't stand in front of a barber to get his hair cut. Lo yichnas adam go to a bathhouse. Lo leburski a tanner. Lo lechol v'lo ledin. Not go to eat. Not go into court. In his chilu, a mafsikin. If you started any of these things, you have to stop. The reason for limitation that these activities could take longer. We learned early in the Shir that the afternoon is divided into two periods, called Mincha Gedola from 6.5 hours into the day until 9.5. That's the period of Mincha Gedola. And Mincha Ketana from 9.5 hours. Which one of these periods is referred to as the Mincha when the prohibitions commence? Either way, many Rishonim write that close to means half an hour beforehand. So it would be forbidden to start the listed activities either from midday or from 9 hours into the day. The Gemara discusses this at length. Hey, Samach L'Mincha, what's considered Samach L'Mincha? Do we say it's half an hour before 6.5? Amaylo, Tuva. There's plenty of time left. Why would we be concerned that he should stop his activities because he's going to miss mincha? He's got 6 hours left. Ella must mean samach l'mincha katana. Means when 9.5 hours day come, a half hour before, you shouldn't start with this activity. But if he started with any of those activities, ein mafsikin. So the Gemara says, name it Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. This is going to be a contradiction to Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Kiven she gives man tefillas mincha. Once tefillas mincha came, also lo adam sheyitom klum kodem shespal tefillas mincha. Once you're not allowed to taste anything. Certainly, you have to. If he ate, he has to stop eating, based on this. The Gemara says lo olam samach lemincha gedolo. This part's ben alasha. No, we're talking about he has to stop 30 minutes before 6.5 hours in the day, but he had his very special haircut, like a beetle haircut, which was very complicated and would require a long time to complete. Then it says Velola Merchatz. You shouldn't go into the bathhouse. Lakula Milsa de Merchatz. and anything. Lolaborsaki, anything connected to the bathhouse. Washing one's hair, rinsing, sweating. Also, Laborsaki Gedola, the tannery, reference to a large tannery, where he's a tanner, there are many hides that he has to do it. And then he may not eat because he may lost, okay, he has a lot of tanning. V'lola din, we're talking about Tchilsa din. Ravacha bar Yaakov Amar la'olam b'tispors tidan. Ravacha says, no, it's our haircuts. L'chatchila malo yeshev. Why shouldn't you start? Gzer shema yishaver as maybe you'll break the scissors. Lola merchatz lazeh ba'almo. Even sweating. L'chatchila milo. Gzer shema yisafa. Maybe you'll faint through the sweating. V'lola borski liyuna ba'almo. He's not going to go actually tan things. He's going to investigate what needs to be done. So if that's the case, he's going to see that he's going to lose money. He's going to get all concerned. And we're talking about we're talking about a small meal. So because he'll prolong the meal. Why shouldn't he start with the verdict? Because maybe I see a reason to that means you're a dayan, and you're going to come up with reasons why you're going to make the guy innocent. So based on this Gemara, so the Gemara offers three approaches for explaining which type of activities are forbidden. The activities listed in the Mishnah are only forbidden to start close to Mincha Ketana, when there's limited time left to daven Mincha. If one started those activities, he's not obligated to stop, even during the Mincha Ketana period. According to this possibility, the Mishnah is a refutation of the statement of Tzurba ben Levi, who says that under no circumstances may one even taste anything once the time for Mincha is arrived before davening. The Mishnah only forbade particularly time-consuming activities. For this reason, starting these activities is forbidden close to Mincha Gedola, despite the 6 hours that you have in which to daven. But if he started these activities, you're not obligated to stop. The Mishnah forbids even more simple activities close to Mincha Gedola. Although much time remains before the latest time, the sages were concerned that unforeseen circumstances, you're going to break the scissors. The Gemara does not reach an explicit conclusion as to which of these three possibilities is accepted as halacha. And the Rishonim, the Balamor, Tosfos, and the Rif will go into a major machlokes how to learn up this Gemara. I'm going to stop here. And before we get involved in that, and we will continue next week with hopefully concluding the laws of Mincha going into Meir. Any questions, comments, ha'aros? Okay, does this all jive with everything we're used to in terms of Mincha, Ma'ariv, davening? I think it's a reinforced. No, we haven't gotten to this thing, but what do we have to do time-wise regarding stopping our activities? We'll see what the halacha is next week.
Start a surgery.
You can't start another page, see if another patient.
Yeah.
But the truth is, there's like one flourish for everything you do. There's a-
You know,
Yeah, but you see, there's a prevailing custom.
Right, but you
The
can
Mishnah
rely
Berurah
on
gives
it.
us the
What if you
prevailing
do
custom.
rely on something?
you know,
Susie was saying there's opinions on every place, but there's a prevailing custom that, or like Yaakov said, a lot of it has to do with this Hasidic. The Hasidic minyanim are much more lax with time.
yeah, growing up in Rabbi Ganzweig's shul, it was very tough getting minions sometimes, especially, like Shabbos afternoon. But they daven according, Rabbeinu Tam time. So many times they would wait till the last second to daven mincha, hopefully hoping for a minion to walk in the door. But yeah,
They relied on that leniency of the Rabbeinu Tam, which we learned tonight. What's important that we see these sources, so we know that what they're based on. Okay, so next week, same time, 8:15. And again, I gave